Welcome everyone to Deep Drinks Podcast, where the drinks are deep and the conversations are deeper, the deepest podcast on the internet. Today I welcome Elliot, also known as Secular Rarity, someone who almost needs no introduction. You've seen him on Talk Even, Atheist Republic, Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist, Skeptic Haven, Tang, Heretical Hideout Discord, The Atheist Experience, Growing Up Fundy, and more. Elliot is a strong advocate for human rights, critical thinking, LGBTQ+ rights, education, religious freedom, and the separation of church and state. Today, we are drinking the most delicious, I hope, I'm pretty sure, of craft beers, and it's going to be an awesome conversation. So sit back, relax, get your favorite drink, tell us what you're drinking in the comments, and let's get started. Hey, welcome Elliot to Deep Drinks Podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I think it's going to be a good time. So,
I was just saying this before we kind of went live, but like I've seen you everywhere, but I actually know very little about your journey. So I'm excited to learn a little bit about that today. But I also want to kind of let the conversation go where the drinks kind of take us, where the very special drink takes us. So can you tell us a little bit about what we're drinking today?
Yeah. So, this is a beer by a company that I'm a huge fan of. I know that not everybody out there in the world is a big fan of A, beer in general, or B, stout and porter style beers, but those are my favorite. And one thing about this beer that I very much love. So I got the little box here with me. I kept it just to keep it up as a prop here. But then I'm just gonna toss it because it's trash at this point. I mean recycling, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway,
hang on a sec. Are you
getting feedback?
Oh, sorry, I can see you now. Sorry, it froze for a second.
Oh,
I don't know what's going on.
Oh, okay. We good?
Yeah.
Can you still?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So tell us about this beer.
Yeah. So Samuel Smith makes a handful of different stouts and porters. And one thing that's really cool about them, and you might, I don't know if you can kind of see just that little box right there.
Yeah.
So that's a picture of their brewery in Yorkshire over in the UK. And they are open air stone square vats that they actually ferment the beer in. And these vats are the vats that they have used for like literally the last like 400 years or something, which is really cool. Yeah. And so they use the original water. They still use the water from the well that was originally sunk there. Again, like 400 some odd years ago. They use the same, recipes and stuff. So I'm a big fan of theirs. I also they make this other guy, the organic chocolate stout. Many years ago when I was finally legal to go purchase alcohol myself, which I'm actually gonna pour this beer here, but I started going around and just trying a bunch of different types of beer. So my father had made wine throughout my whole life. So I tried a couple of different wines, tried a couple of different liquors. I am in Tennessee. Not to say that like I was just like downing moonshine as a child, but I definitely had some more access to stuff like that. And so when I went out and started buying alcohol, I wanted to try a bunch of different types of beers. And one of the first beers that I really enjoyed was the Samuel Smith organic chocolate stout. And so then I just, bought everything I could from them that was in that style. They also have another one that's a porter. It's a pretty good London porter as well. So yeah, those are my types of drink when it comes, in general. If I'm out at a bar, the thing I say, I go up to the bartender, they say, "Hey, what are you looking for?" I say, "What's the darkest thing you got on tap?" And normally it comes out pretty
wow.
good. So Yeah.
So I have a little bit of a story behind this as well. In that, when Aaron Ra came on, he loves stout,
Mhm.
and he told me to get Cooper's double stout. I think it was like it's a Q-tip.
Ooh.
It's a very, and I'm like Cooper's. I was like, oh, it's like it's a very generic beer in Australia. Well, it's not super generic, but it's like I'm a little bit. I like my craft beers a lot, and so I was like Cooper's. I was like, oh, I'm not super. I was expecting something really weird, bizarre from
Yeah.
Aaron Ra. I thought I'd be like, ship it, like air shipping it in from like some like bizarre place, like, and I was like, oh, Australian beer. I was like, okay, whatever. And I drank it. I was like, this is fucking amazing. And I've just found this love for stouts. And then only last night when I was putting these in the fridge, I realized they were stouts, and I was like, oh man. So I got the oatmeal stout, Samuel Smith oatmeal stout here, and I'm just so excited to try it because and this is like looks like a thick shake. What's interesting too is these were hard to get, but I got them in Australia, which is good to say. But like they cost me like two of these tallies cost me about the same price as like a whole case.
Okay. So I was wondering what the price would ultimately come out for you. And in fairness, I it's highly possible when you asked me like what should you get, I like one of the first things I said to you was like, oh man, I don't know exactly what you would have close by at your store.
Yeah. Oh no, it's not like you demand. I was like, no, I'm ready to spend the money.
I know, but I then was like, okay, well, I'm a huge fan of this company. I do always drink their stuff. Also, it's international for me to begin with, so I was hoping that you would have an easier time. But they only sell them in 4-packs. I think they do tend to run in my area about the same as like a craft beer 6-pack. Similar. Okay. So like, a little bit higher than your standard 6-pack to begin with. But
I think they were, I think with delivery, it was like $45 for 2 beers.
Oh my God.
For two balls. For two tall balls.
Oh my God.
But dude,
I'm telling you, I hope it's worth
it. I had, who's it? Amazing episode. Dr. Kyle Smith, author of Cult of the Dead. And he's like, we're drinking tequila, but he's like, I had to get the worm salt as well. He's like, we're getting worm salt, and that was $45 just for the worm salt. So I had to order it in from Mexico.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
So I appreciate all the super chats, everyone, because I still think we're running in the red.
right here. Send them.
Okay, let me try this beer, and as I try this, I want to ask the question: do you believe in God?
Funny enough, I don't.
Oh,
yeah, I know. I'm still skeptical on dogs, but I kind of feel like they're probably real. But
you
God's, but God's probably not. Yeah.
So are you? And you're an atheist, right? You're like a hard out to believe in. Okay, so why? I'm treating this interview very differently than how I normally do. So
that's okay. Please, anything you want to, wherever you want to go, brother, I'll follow.
Yeah.
And you just at any point, again, just cut me off and be like, "Oh, shut up."
No.
That's definitely like.
I just thought I'd take a different approach. I'd act like a Christian almost. Like, why don't you believe in God? Why not?
That's not.
Tell us about it.
For me, the biggest reason is that after finding out that my reasons at the time, I didn't have any justification, more so than believing a lot of other things. And because I didn't believe those things, I said, well, I'd like to try to be consistent as much as possible. And then upon investigating the evidence, I haven't found anything. And more often than not, what I have found actually is specific reasons why not to believe. And that's a particular stance that I take that not everybody necessarily does that takes the atheist label. But like me personally, I say every single version of God that I have ever had described to me, that anybody has ever told me about or presented evidence for, I have found to be logically inconsistent, so impossible in some way, right? Or just the evidence not being sufficient to warrant that belief. So is it possible that there is a version of a deity out there that I have not heard of that could meet that criteria? Yes, that absolutely, that is possible. But I just haven't, come across it yet. So until then, none of them. I don't think any of them are real.
That's similar. That's similar to myself. And I was recently on yesterday. I was on Sydney Davis Jr.'s channel. It was a great conversation. But for me, yeah, it was very much similar. Like this God belief is like a mega belief. Like you have all these like prayer works. The Bible's true. It was a tradition I brought up with, and then when you kind of like start to analyze each one of those things, you can test prayer. We can find out. We can look at the scholarship of the Bible. And when you start to look at those things started to disappear. And then I realized, like, do I have reason to believe anymore? And the answer for me was no. And same. But what kind of Christian were you?
I was Methodist. So
Methodist.
now we weren't particularly hung up on that label. But that was what our denomination was. And there were definitely differences that I recognized around the time that I ended up leaving. So basically, to make a long story as short as possible, when I was born, I was infected with something that put me in the emergency room, the NICU, for about like a month. So brand new baby, laying in the hospital overnight, to the emergency room for the brand new babies. That place. It is generally common for Methodists to baptize a newborn baby. So that did not occur for me. And then it just didn't happen for another few years, even though we went to church and even though I was a believer. So that was a problem for me up until I think it was like 8 or 9 when I actually decided to get baptized, which was kind of a big deal in the church because that's a Baptist thing. That's what the Baptists do. So the Southern Baptists don't baptize you when you're a baby. You actually have to choose it. And a lot of that happens around that age that I ended up getting baptized at. But that was a big deal for me. So I did choose that. And then I ended up going through confirmation, which is similar to like the Catholics, because the Methodists are an interesting breed for sure. Normally though, they're a little bit more friendly and cool on stuff. Like you're gonna find more so the Methodist churches are not opposing LGBT rights and stuff. So,
yeah. Okay.
Not consistently across the board, of course. Believe me, they have their atrocious problems just like a lot of the others do. But in general, they seem to be a little better.
When I type in Methodist, it's just a lot of pride flags and stuff in church is what's showing up on.
Yeah.
So for some reason, I thought Methodists were the ones that were very close to like. I thought they were like. I'm thinking I'm getting them confused with Seventh-day Adventists, so that's why I was like so surprised. So interesting. Okay, so when did you start to? Like, how long were you in that faith for? Like, how old were you until you started questioning things?
So I ended up playing in the handbell and chimes choirs for the church for years, which I do have to say is probably the number one thing that I missed. Like playing those handbells is amazing. And it's almost... Go ahead.
What is it? A handbell?
Oh yeah. So if you look up handbell choir on Google, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. It's a table of very large brass bells generally, but they get smaller as they get higher in pitch, and then larger as they get lower in pitch, obviously.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and it's cool. Gorgeous music, oftentimes to play. Again, it's pretty much exclusively a church thing, mainly because that's most of the music that's for it. And I bet you, if you searched hard enough, there's probably a video or two of me playing as a child, because we played a couple of different things. Like we did this one because where I am in Tennessee is a lot of different churchy type things. So there's a handful of different, well-known, churches and organizations based in this area, and they do a big youth groupie thing every so often. So my handbell choir actually got to play for like some few thousand Christian teens years ago, whatever. But anyway, so it was around that, like, 17, 18 age is when I really started didn't take the label atheist, didn't even really take the label agnostic, definitely still a Christian, definitely still believe stuff. And then, a year or two would go by, and then, okay, well, now I'm just going through all the rounds on YouTube of all the big debates and everybody, what everybody's talking about, because there's a lot of material out there. And then just slowly started finding my way into more recent stuff. And then that led me to a couple of live streams. And I found out that there's people that do it like actively, like on a weekly basis. And I reached out to that wonderful dude, Ethan Michael, from Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. And he gave me a shot and let me help out behind the scenes for a bit. And next thing you know, I'm helping out other places and I'm hanging out with other people and talking. And I'm now one of the hosts on the Atheist Experience. So I'm really excited for that.
That's incredible. The Atheist Experience was such an important like series for me when I used to watch it every I was like a Monday at work, and I used to have it on my screen in the bottom right hand corner. I'd listen to it, and I was always too scared to call up, but it was it's such an important stream. And I used to watch that I used to play StarCraft 2 and sink and drink some scotch and listen to that 4-hour compilation of Matt Delahanty that over like space like 10 years. I just listened to it over and over again. My uncle's like, "You're being brainwashed." I'm like, maybe, but I love it. It's so good. It's just so the like when you really get a conversation, like it become one of my favorite things was when you have a conversation that like someone has like put themselves, I guess, into a position of like they can't move out of what and the next logical step is they have to like admit where they're wrong or something, and they just refuse to. It's my favorite thing. Like you see that there's that clip. I think I'm not sure. Is it Forrest or is someone that's going around at the moment? It's really viral. It's like if I set my girlfriend on fire, am I a good and loving, partner? And then they say, if you set your girlfriend on fire, you never love her to begin with. And then he's like, if God sends you to hell, he never loved you to begin with. And the person's like, wrong.
It's probably Forrest.
Yeah.
Forrest is awesome.
Oh, geez. And it's just such a cool group of people, and the spin-off shows and stuff are really cool as well.
Yeah.
So what were the things that kept you in like that were like the hardest for you to kind of like get rid of in your faith, like or to kind of process, like, because I talked about just a second ago, but like it's like a mega belief. You have these like little areas. Like what were the things that what were the reasons that you believed that you had to investigate to discover that you no longer believed?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that I started looking into that really got me in this headspace on a regular basis of, thinking that maybe what I thought about the Bible and God wasn't correct, was different moral arguments. So reading through a handful of different, constructed moralities for me was really important, and reading about why various people disagreed with others in the past and why those beliefs are still going on today and kind of what their updates had been. But what actually kept me in the belief system for so long was stuff that is really, really vague. And this is why this is some of the stuff that I really do end up pushing back on a lot harder, is because what I actually believed was a couple of things. So one, that everything was just answered by God, period. There wasn't a continuing explanation because it wasn't necessary. It was explained with that statement. With that concept alone, everything was explained. Why do kids get cancer? Because God, period, end of sentence. You can argue that you feel bad about that, but that doesn't matter, because the true overarching understanding of what God is answers this question. Now, again, you would say, like, right now, like, yeah, but SR, like, what is the answer to that question? And there isn't one. Like, I understand that now, But at the time, what I had was just the vague thought stopping techniques that I hear a lot of apologists like to use. And a lot of people who are sincere in their belief, they accept these as good reasons because they do feel like they're good. So just this idea that there was ever any issue whatsoever that needed to be justified, that whole idea was just not in my head because I had already had it answered with just the basic concept of God. Now, it would take me a long time to understand that the reason my God was seemingly so much more chill and loving was just because those were already the things that I accepted as a person, right? But that's why whenever there was like the idea of arguing about your belief or justifying your belief did not make sense. I had never heard apologetics until stepping into the atheist space. And the reason I had never heard it was because it wasn't necessary. If somebody tried to tell me that we had found evidence for Noah's Ark and the flood, I dismissed it because it was unnecessary to explain what God had already explained. And then the second big vague, go ahead.
It's like, is it like you don't, it's like there's no need to find evidence for Noah's flood because God said there was a flood, so there was a flood. Like there's no
and whether or not that flood was a global flood or a local flood or an allegory, none of that matters because it was all answered in the fact that God did exist. And if God existed, then any problems that I felt that I had as not God didn't matter because I existed. I was here. God existed. God's here. God created everything. All of this is God's playground. Done. You don't have to go ahead.
What would you say to someone? Because you said, like, why is there cancer in children? God. What would you say to, my Christian stuff would say, no, that's not accurate. I would say that it was the devil. The devil did that, and and God needs the devil because
God could have stopped the devil. God could always stop the devil.
Hey,
right? If I mean, God can always stop the devil. Are you saying that so we're pretending to be Christians, right? We're putting our Christian hats on. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Argue with me. I'm pretending to be. I'm playing devil's advocate. Yeah.
Right. And I'm going back into that old mindset because I obviously know, but what I would have said to you as a believing Christian, if you had said to me, well, the reason there's bad stuff in the world is because of the devil, my response would have been, but you're not saying that the devil is more powerful than God, of course, right? And if you're agreeing with me, then what you're saying is that anything that the devil does absolutely is something that, again, is well within God's understanding. How could you try to justify something as being problematic when you don't know the mind of God? It's impossible for you to understand that, right?
Yeah, so you would have the.
Go ahead.
Well, that's where you get we can ask him when we meet him, and
exactly
for
all the
reasons that are completely sufficient for God. Yeah,
exactly. That was what I had accepted on such a deep level that, again, no justification was ever needed. And I did have conversations with other Christians and other believers who felt that way. And that was the way I spoke with them, which, again, is why when people do that today for me, right? Like when people say the real vague stuff about like, oh, God is love, or oh, God is energy, or God is the universe. What I try to express is how that concept is meaningless, because on the actual truth of that, you definitely don't mean that. When you say God is love, you're not literally saying that what you think created everything around you and justifies all of these things that you want justified in this problem is actually the simple concept of love. That is not what you're saying. And once you get people to recognize that they do actually have a distinction between these two concepts, and that while love may be a super important aspect of your concept of God, there is actually still a bullseye that is your concept of God. And once you get to a place of recognize, at least for me, and this is what I hope for others and, try to help with, is once I got to the place of recognizing that in reality, I didn't know what God was. I had no definition. I had no understanding whatsoever. And that was why it was so easy for me to answer all those questions with, well, God. I mean, it's literally God of the gaps. Because any problem that you brought up was justified by the simple fact that God does exist. Period. End of sentence. And if God exists, it takes care of all these problems.
I can still see like
there's lots of issues.
No. Yeah, and the thing is, this is what I often say to people, because I've had long conversations with people who have like reached out to me on Instagram or Twitter and said like, you're wrong about this or something, and then I say, well, let's jump on a phone call. And I've had conversations with absolute randoms.
Wow.
And if I'm in the right mood, I'll actually have to take these calls. But like, and they'll have answers for a lot of everything. Was it was Noah flood real? Yes, it was real. Like everything you can name. But the problem is, you can justify anything. You can find a way to make anything work. Muhammad splitting the moon in two, it happened, and this is what it really means, and you can work it out. And it's the allegory I like to say, or the analogy or allegory, I don't know which word I'm misusing, but say I was to get into a plane, I'll say I'm going to come to Tennessee, and I'm going to be there tomorrow, I'm going to walk there, and then I get on a plane and I fly there, and I see you the next day, and you go, and I say, I walked all the way to Tennessee, and you're like, well, that's not true.
Right.
Let's say this is a deep drinks religion 500 years from now, when they're talking about the prophet David McDonald, and they're like, he did actually walk there because David was smart, and he knew that he can get deep vein thrombosis and blood clots if you don't walk up and down the aisle of the plane. So you've got to walk up and down the aisle of the plane.
So the entire,
it's actually
right.
It's teaching a science. It's actually teaching a science before we, and you can come up with you can make anything work if you try hard enough. Yes. But is it the most likely scenario? Well, no.
Right.
Probably not.
Right. And those that with the general feeling as if every little tiny thing that occurred in my life was a message, was specifically about the whole entity of existence telling me something. A bird lands on the tree, tweets at me as I walk by. That was a sign. What was the sign? Who knows? It could be anything. Why was it there? Who knows? Didn't matter necessarily, but it was deeply important. And every single thing was like that. Those two very, very simple, vague thought-stopping techniques prevented me from ever even just questioning. And once I got to the place of recognizing that those prevented me from questioning, and I didn't have a concept there in the center, that was when it was like, oh, I don't believe this anymore. And then I started looking into other things and justifying, but it's weird.
Isn't it amazing that, you can walk down the street and a bird tweets at you and you're like, that's God telling me something.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I had a conversation with someone who said, God speaks to me because I always see this number everywhere. And the number is like 283 or something.
I can absolutely tell you about that. That was for years of my life, man. Every single time I would look at something that had numbers on it. So like you drive by a mailbox, right? And it'd say like 1245, okay? But 1245 wasn't important, right? But if you add 4 and 5 together, see, that gives you 9. And if you take 2 and you multiply that by 1, it gives you 2. And so you take 9 times 2 gives you 18, which 1 plus 8 equals 9. Dude, you see that, right? I mean, you see it. You know how, I mean, it's clear. It's so, now, why did you multiply some things and subtract other things? No, none of that mattered. Again, it just by the end of the answer, it was just like, oh yeah, I feel good about this now. I feel good.
It's you feel good about it. There's what's that? There's I forgot what the term is. It's my brain isn't working today. But it's never working at the moment. I don't know what's going on with my brain. But it's
more like, alcohol will help it.
Yeah, more alcohol. Maybe it's because I'm doing too many deep drinks. But essentially, I remember being a kid, and my younger brother, myself, and my mum were going to go fishing. And that morning, we saw we're struggling to catch fish. We're at Arthur War in the Central Coast, Sapphire Coast in New South Wales, Australia, and we were going to go fishing. And I remember seeing a cartoon, and there was a fish on the cartoon, and I said, "Mum," I said, "there's a card. This must mean we're going to get a fish today." I was like, "That's evidence that we're going to get a fish," and I don't think we did get a fish, or we got a little fish. Like,
Yeah. But
I
it didn't matter because even if you didn't get a fish, David, what that was actually God sending you that message so that you could have the disappointment to recognize that what you needed to do was actually rely on God and not on your own understanding. See, you thought you could go fish by yourself, but in reality, only God can truly fish.
Yeah, or you know, God was trying to teach me at a young age that I needed to be a fisher of men.
A fisher of men, exactly. Yes, you're casting your net in the wrong place, David, and that's really what he was trying to say. See, that's you got it. Now. You're getting it. You're following.
That's so good. That's so good, and it can never lose, right?
No,
it's amazing.
Exactly. It doesn't matter what the. And that's always the thing, is that the actual explanation is oftentimes really not that important, right? And more often than not, and we do this too as non-believers. Like, don't think we're immune from this. This is just a common thing that humans do a lot of times. If somebody comes up to you and you go, "Well, why do you think that?" You know, you want to try to justify that one hamburger is better than another, you know, and somebody says, "Well, yeah, why?" And you go, "Oh man, because of the bun." I mean, like the bun alone, okay? And then you get that beautiful, beautiful Anthony Magnabosco question. If I could prove to your satisfaction that the reason that you say is what's underpinning this belief, if I could prove to you to your satisfaction that that isn't true, would that change your feeling? And while we'll say yes, while most of us will say yes, the question is whether or not we mean that. And that's always really fascinating to try and break apart, because for a lot of things, we really don't have a good reason. We just like this one place better. And we can come up with all these other things afterwards. But again, if I were to show to you, for instance, I have a favorite bar, okay? I have a favorite bar in my area. Love the food, love the place, love the people. Guess what? The food has actually kind of changed over the time that I've been going. Not completely, obviously. It's still very much in the same style, but the menu is obviously not 100% the same. And the same thing is true for the staff. You know, they have changed, like not completely. There's still a couple of people there that are still the main core, but at the end of the day, they have changed. Now, the restaurant hasn't like picked up and moved, obviously, but I did. I moved to a further distance, and before, what I said was the location was so close to me, it was perfect. And so, well, most of the things they all changed. So like, are they really the reason that that's where I like to go so much? Maybe not, you know, but we just don't feel it's necessary to justify such things on such a deep level, which is honestly understandable. Like, it would be absurd to live your life with trying to say like, I have to have 100% solid reasons for every little decision that I make. No, it's okay to just go to a place because you like it, you know, screw it. It doesn't matter. But when it comes to these other things, right? When it comes to these deep conversations, yes, we really should put that level of effort into it, because it does have a lot greater ramifications. Whether or not I go to this fucking bar tomorrow ain't going to change much about the economics in Tennessee, ain't going to change much about like my bank account. It isn't going to change much about the status of my currently dying liver. Like, it's all going to be about the same.
Yeah, exactly. I've just pinned a message to the channel. So to the chat, guys, if you want to see more of Secular Rarity, his Linktree is posted, and you can support him on Patreon, join his Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. It's all there. And if you want to reach out and argue with him about beer choices, he might not get back to you, but try it on one of these one of these things. Also, I have to say, I'm a little disappointed in chat. Like, I love all you guys, I really do, but no one has pointed out that at the bottom it says sex education stream tomorrow with Amy, McDonald, apostasy.
So I thought you did that on purpose, in fairness, because I was like, you know what? I watched that last one, and it was pretty sexy. Like it was. So
Well,
I mean,
we're doing another, but the reason, like,
it's supposed
so
to be sex education, right? Not
well,
sexy education.
so let me just quickly just share the screen. So it's the second part. So tomorrow we're doing, the first one was purity culture horror stories. But the reason why no one's putting it out is I wrote, these are the guests: Amy McDonald, Apostasy, Family Dr. Ben, Jeremy Schumer, Nicole Mitchell, and myself, and then in brackets, alpha male. No one, that was a joke, but no one has like commented about, there's no way I would ever describe myself as an alpha male.
So I again thought I thought you put that on there and was just like, yeah, that seems right. Like that seems, I felt like, good with that. Yeah.
I didn't tell the world I'm an alpha male. So tomorrow we have the sexy education panel. So we did the purity culture horror stories. So tomorrow my wife is actually joining Amy McDonald, which will be fun with Atlas. She may have to dip in and out a little, but it's going to be just sexy education. So first we talked about purity culture horror stories, and I said to, and Jeremy's like, oh, we're gonna nail this. He's like, we got Jeremy, the guy on the left here. He's a family and relationship therapist.
Oh, cool.
And Nicole Mitchell is a pastor turned porn star. So regarding sex education, we've got, just with those two, we've got it down pat, and then the rest of us are going to kind of like share our stories and give advice. But it's going to be fun, so make sure you check that out.
Yeah, the first one was good. I enjoyed the crap out of that. So
thank you. Yeah. But of course, Secular Rarity, go check out his stuff. You're just everywhere. When's your next show? Actually, straight after this, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm gonna be. So right after this, I'm gonna go hang out with the wonderful Dr. Ben over on his Twitch for he's doing awards tonight, actually. And then on Saturday, he is asking me to come back on so that he can talk about various at-home enemas that people are doing that are just terrible, and just for behind the scenes for everybody, so that you kind of know how, what Ben and my relationship is like. He messaged me one day, no context leading up to this, and was just like, hey man, I'd really like to do an episode on enemas, and I can't think of anybody better to talk about than you. So I still don't 100% know how to take that, but we are still very good friends. So I guess I'm okay with it. So, but yeah, we're going to talk about, amazing, I guess, things you shouldn't be putting up your butt. So, because there are some things that it's perfectly fine for you to put up your butt as long as you take proper precaution. And then there are other things you should never put up your butt, like coffee, I think actually is one we'll be talking about.
Yeah. And maybe, you know what, maybe Ben can give us a little taste of that tomorrow, because we're talking about sex education, talking about sticking things up your butt. Like maybe we can give a bit of a preview to your conversation. That's amazing. So
for next time, David, and this is just a purely personal suggestion, use a different phrase than a little taste when talking about enemas.
I have the worst, how like people, like I have the worst, like I half say things. I know I'm trying to get better, but like I half say things. I say the wrong words. I still remember being like 2 or 3 years old and saying something that was so offensive that my whole, like I was my dad, and I was with like all my aunties and stuff, like, and they all looked at me in horror, and I got taken to the car and sat down. I didn't know what I said, but apparently it was so offensive because, and I didn't mean to be offensive. It's just I've got, my brain doesn't work sometimes. It's horrible. Like no. Taste of enema. What is that? Also, thank you, Amber, for the $2 super chat. You must construct additional pylons. Yes, StarCraft 2. I was a Proton. See, it's happening again. Protoss player. Yeah, Proton player. But yes, StarCraft. They were my team. Taste. I can't believe that. Little taste of enemas. So, what do you think is the best evidence for God? If I was to ask you to, let's spice it up a little bit. Let's say a magic genie pops out of a beer or something and says to you, there is evidence, there is a God.
Okay.
and you'll go to heaven if you can determine the best evidence for God.
Yeah.
Let's say you want to go to heaven.
Yeah, we're moving past. We're not focusing on the magic genie popping out of the beer thing. We're
No.
We're just going for what is the best evidence. Gosh, that's a good question. Ooh, sorry. I have gotten asked this before, and I'm sure my answer has changed and probably will change. I think, and maybe this is just from my background, I think because I'm such in a place now where the idea of having sufficient evidence to meet the burden of proof for the supernatural as a whole, because I think that is so lacking. The strongest arguments, I think, are the ones that are thought stopping, specifically because they don't get you to the place of trying to inquire. So if, like, let's just say, like I just keeled over right now from something, and like my soul went up to heaven, and I was standing there with St. Peter, and St. Peter was like, "Hey man, look, we know that you're not an atheist, or we know you don't believe, in God. We know you're not a theist, okay? But we're going to give you an option. If you can, you get one chance, pick your best argument for why you believe. What would you say?" Obviously, avoiding the fact that I'm currently experiencing all of this and have tangible evidence of the, St. Peter, the pearly gates and shit. I would go back to where I was in my belief, which is God just exists and answers all of the problems. And I just wouldn't have any justification for that. And I don't think at this point, just having heard so many of them, I'm just in a place of saying, I really don't think there's anything that is good enough to distinguish between any one of them. The idea of like the teleological argument is just on its face wrong, in my opinion, because you're assuming something that you don't have any good reason to assume, more so than any other conclusions. And the burden that you would ultimately put on yourself by adopting that as true would outweigh itself very quickly in your real life than to just assume that it is not true. Because again, it's kind of like we don't have go ahead.
Sorry.
No, please interrupt me at any time.
What is the teleological argument?
So the teleological argument is basically like everything is designed for a purpose. Like God already has laid everything out. And so like things are just kind of like, doing what they are originally created to do from a essentially infinite past and future, right? Like it's all in God's domain. God made the whole freaking timeline. He put every little piece on it. The fact that scissors work like scissors is because God says this is how scissors are going to work. And so it's like things are just kind of behaving in a certain manner and playing out to an already fixed, agreed upon conclusion at the end. The end of the book is already written. It's just that we're in the process of reading it. But that assumption just doesn't have anything, in my opinion, that outweighs it to believe it over other similar type assumptions, like at the end of the day, that it's just the first go around, like that there isn't a conclusion in the future. Those are technically both assumptions. We can't really justify either of them. But if you accept the other one, what my argument is that puts such a burden on you in all of these other scenarios that we agree upon that outweighs it. And that's why I pick the one that I pick. So this is similar to other things too, like the foundation of logic. A lot of presuppositionalists will say, you don't have a reason that justifies why logic works, right? You don't have a reason to accept logic. And correct, sure. It's just that if I take on your stance, which is saying my justification is this particular thing, God, that then ultimately later on down the line in using that logic puts all this burden on me that I don't think it's worth putting on when you can answer all those things. So basically I have one problem, which is that justification, but then everything else seems to work pretty well. You have an answer to that one problem in your supposedly, but you have all of these other problems that appear later on that you have to now go through extra effort to justify, and I don't.
Yeah.
And that's where I mean, that's where I win, quote unquote.
My favorite way to address the problem when someone says, "Where did we come from?" as if like God answers that question, is I say, I think we came from the same place that you believe God came from.
Boom.
Which then like
100%.
they go, well, no, God didn't come from anywhere. God just was. And I said, so why can't we just say the same thing about everything?
Exactly.
Because that and that's not a satisfying answer, but it's pointing out the hypocrisy in their methodologies.
Right. And neither answer is satisfying, because the theist, if they're being honest, more often than not, and I have a lot of these conversations. So like a buddy of mine in Nashville puts on like in-person discussions. And so we've done a good few of those, you know, with just regular average Joe Blow people walking around the city and drinking coffee and stuff. And so I really enjoy engaging in this stuff, even just as like a hobby and stuff. But when you're having a discussion with somebody who is being very honest and vulnerable in their faith, more often than not, they will probably tell you that answer does not satisfy them, because it's not a satisfying answer, because most likely there just isn't one. And there's a few other big questions in life that humanity has been grappling with for a very long time, that while you can argue we have made some progress on, ultimately at the end of the day, what we have are unsatisfactory answers. And that's just the case. And it may just be for all eternity, forever and ever and never, and not gonna freaking change no matter what, that there are just always going to be these like 4 questions that we just never have a great answer to. We have some kind of answer, but it's still really not that good. The problem is, if we want to now add a 5th, if you want to come to me and say, there's actually this other thing that is not explained, that falls into the same category as these other 4, but actually justifies those 4. Well, from there, what I'm going to say is that seems to be an unnecessary step. You seem to be going an extra step. And I would probably then even go so far as to say, I also feel like later on down the line, that would present all these problems, you know? And so that's just where I'm at with like everything in the whole supernatural stuff now. Like ghosts, like aliens visiting. I mean, aliens visiting us, I guess, isn't supernatural, but you know what I'm saying? Like supernatural, super intensely specific claims about stuff that we really just don't have good evidence for, but apparently humans have been talking about for a long time. Probably no living organism ever actively breathed fire on its own without any outside ignition source. Right? Like we're all comfortable with saying that.
Yeah.
Like dragons.
Imagine the fires, like the wildfires it would have.
Right. We would have just, the earth would have been fucking destroyed so long ago. Also, what do you have? You just have a pilot light in the middle of a fucking iguana? Like it doesn't make any sense. Like it, you know, you could argue like, oh, okay, well, it's a really large animal, and their type of digestive tract would have caused a particular type of gas that has more of a combustible, you know, to it. Like, yeah, you could argue some of that. It's still fucking stupid, but like, where do you get the fire? Where do you actually get the spark? What does it do? It just has flint on its teeth. Like it doesn't.
Well, what happens is cows used to be very hairy, and they used to get like bits of flint caught in their tail, and when they would move it around when they were farting, it would spark and light their methane. And that, like, there's ways to ways to justify anything. Yeah,
there was just flint everywhere in those days. It just rained.
And a cow's butthole kind of looks like an iguana's mouth from a distance. Like you could come up with anything, man. Like God. So
yes.
What about like the kalam, or like the cosmological arguments? Like everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause. I can. It kind of depends on how I'm feeling and the particular individual that I'm talking with on that. But like for instance, I could say right now, like no problem, cool. Where do we go? And then we just have to go somewhere, because like I don't have any problem with saying that there is a necessary thing, right? I don't even have a problem with saying that all of existence came from a particular starting point,
a particular instantiation of some kind. Like those don't necessarily get us to the place that a lot of believers think. You have to add on these other things. And my problem with the construction that we see most recently from William Lane Craig, which real quick, I don't know. So this is something that always kind of bugs me. Okay. And it's not super important, but William Lane Craig did actually create the quote Kalam cosmological argument. He did not create the cosmological argument. That is a style of argument that does go back to Al-Ghazali. But William Lane Craig actually was the first person to codify it in this particular way and titled it Kalam, which is an Arabic word meaning argument. So sometimes I hear atheists that say like William Lane Craig did invent the Kalam. And I'm like, well, no, yeah, he did invent the Kalam. He didn't invent the cosmological argument. It doesn't matter.
But something that annoys me about this, and it's just so easy to just waltz right past it, that is the first premise. Everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Yes.
So if you rephrase that to, that sounds very similar to everything that exists has a cause.
Yeah.
Well, no, because they sneak in God in there by saying
Right.
everything that begins to exist has a cause. So
Right.
God didn't begin to exist.
If we just accept there was no beginning.
Yeah. You're just leading in. You're just like that. There's a whole problem in that premise there, because like if you're going to take this to God, there's a whole problem in that premise there, because how do you justify that God didn't have a beginning? Like
you don't.
It's the necessary starting point. It's like
you don't have any reason to accept that over the same reason that you have to accept that existence as a whole has just always existed in some form or fashion. Like you don't have anything that distinguishes one argument over the other. Again, what you do have though is later on the problems that arise if you accept the God hypothesis there, because truly we don't have a good reason at the end of the day to accept that the universe really like all of existence actually has always somehow existed, or never has, like we don't have that. We just don't. And we have to accept that. But the fun thing is everybody else has to play that game too. And if you want to put an answer in that slot, that's fine. But if it causes extra problems later on that I don't have to deal with, again, quote unquote, like I win. I win this game. That's how it's played. That's how we play. And there's a good, we have good justification to play the game this way. It's like in the middle of chess, you don't just get to say, well, in checkers, you can do this. It's like, yes, you can in checkers. That's not this fucking game. We talked about this an hour ago, you know? Have you ever finished a game of Risk with like 4 people? Have you ever played a game of Risk with like 4 or 5 other people and actually gotten to the end of it?
I don't know if I have, but I don't really remember playing it too much, only a few times.
Twice in my life have I actually gotten to the end of a game of Risk, and I don't speak with those people anymore. And I'm not saying it's necessarily because of that. I'm just saying somewhere in the middle of playing that game, everybody feels like, fuck, why did we do this? This kind of sucks. And it's like, yeah, but these are the rules, and this is just how long it takes. And yeah, it kind of sucks after a minute, and we just have to move on from that. Why can't we play Monopoly instead now? Because 3 hours ago, we agreed we were going to play Risk. So we're going to finish the damn game, Bill. I don't care if you have to go pick up your daughter. Again, I'm not saying it necessarily is the reason I don't talk to them anymore.
I'm one of those people who I don't actually mind Monopoly. Like everyone says, like it's banned in my house. Yeah, but like people say it's ridiculous. But people say it's all chance. I disagree. I can win Monopoly every single time. My wife, settle this for me. And my wife might be watching and she might comment. We had actually, you know what? I just went back exactly on what I just said. I'm about to start an argument about Monopoly when I said I can play Monopoly.
I know. I was going to say like I don't get involved in like personal disputes normally.
So my little brother and I have been playing Monopoly our whole lives, and we just dominate. And we were playing a game with I think it was my mum and Amy, my partner. She was my girlfriend at the time. And we got to the point where, you know, Amy had like one property, and it was like one property or 1 or 2 properties that were like had no hotels on it, and we were just the rest of the board was just covered. And me and Leo, we played it so many times, we got bored. We're like, this is boring. Like this is just a game of chance. Who lands on the hotel and gets like slapped? Like this isn't fun anymore. But there was no way Amy is going to win. Absolutely no way. She had no money. She had no like hotels. So we decided to give up. But Amy says, because you guys gave up, I won. And I was like, no. I was like technically yes, but like there was no way that she was going to win. She's
so
like, no,
let me. I'm not taking any sides. I'm just asking clarifying questions. Okay, trying to be a good skeptic here, right?
Yeah.
Did all three of you equally get an option to continue playing the game or step away from the game?
Look,
and
I just
did
realized,
you?
Like, I'm being intellectually honest. Amy wanted to continue. And I just said no. There's no point. Like we both
did
said no,
continue, right? She
Oh,
did want
shit.
to continue.
Shit.
Because by definition, she is the last person in the game, and you voluntarily quit. If you had continued playing the game, I think it is 100% reasonable she would not have won. But I do think in this specific instance, I'm just going to have to say, as a third party, trying to be impartial here, if the three of you sat there and looked at each other in the eyes and were like, hey, I want to keep going, right? And all three of you stayed, different story. One person stands up and says, hey, I'm just going to quit. You guys can keep going. Okay, it's between those two that stayed. Divide the property. Yeah. Two people in that scenario voluntarily quit, man. I'm sorry, but
what about if like we were like, yep, let's all continue to play, and then some wind blew the whole board over and everything. We just lost everything.
No. Active nature is a completely different. You would call that it would be null. That would be a draw. There would be no winner in that scenario. Yeah, that's unfair, right? If though, and this is a big thing too. That is, of course, if none of you were able to recreate the board exactly in a way that you could demonstrate. Let's say Amy had casually taken a picture of it and it was perfect before the wind came through. And then she was like, hey, I could actually recreate this. I could actually put the board back together exactly. This proves, because you can see a clock and a paper with today's date on it in the background.
So like, how's someone holding up a newspaper? Yeah.
So if all of, I mean, but that's really getting in the weeds. I don't know if anybody's having a good time listening to us now.
Yeah. I still look. I know it's dishonest, but I still say that I'm undefeated in Monopoly. But I'm just being dishonest now.
I feel
I'm
like
happy with being dishonest.
Yeah.
This is my tin hair moment.
This is what we as people, it's the gift and the curse, of being a human. We can hold, mutually exclusive beliefs that disagree with each other.
Okay. So I got two more things I really want to touch on before we wrap up. And I do want to wrap up at the right time, because you're going to jump onto Dr. Ben's stream so one of them is one of the things I want to talk about is, we talked about the reasons to believe in God. So what is the one best reason you would say not to believe in God? Like, I'm not talking about an argument like the ones that we've been using, which is like, I'm not convinced because I don't have any reasons to believe. I'm talking about ones that's like, this looks like this looks like there is no God. Like, this looks like it points in a positive direction that there is no God.
Right. So again, I take a bit harder of a stance than some people when it comes to the label atheism. But what my stance is that anytime I am presented with an explanation as to what God is, the attributes of God, I find that there is something more often than not. Like, the best case scenario is that there just isn't evidence to support it, right? But stepping aside from that, all the other ones have logical problems. So if your God, I mean, most people here will know, like, the problem with the omni trilemma. If your God is, all powerful, all loving, all knowing, well, then evil. Boom. Okay. But that doesn't work if you just accept your God's probably a dick. You could also just accept that your God's incapable. That's a more fun argument, in my opinion, because it basically says God wants to do all these good things, but just can't actually do them, which is fun. He's kind of like a little baby that doesn't know. He's like, he's waving his arms around and like kicking shit. And that's why none of his stuff makes sense. But otherwise, the arguments for God's existence have that type of issue in them in the logical sense, right? So, let me think of another fun one. Oh, I mean, somebody called in the other day and was saying that, the use of the phrase "oh my God" that a lot of people shout in particular moments of like trauma, like that justifies God. That's obviously a non sequitur, right? We don't have to go through any of the logical problems with that. That's
Well,
just stupid.
I was
Go ahead.
just quickly. I was talking to some ex-Muslims yesterday, and we're talking about that exact thing. And and someone made the argument that there was a car that backfired. Everyone was on a bus, and I think the bus backfired. And I think this is a joke, but the person said, "Oh my God!" And then the Christian turns to the person who said that, who was a Muslim, and said, "See, you don't say 'Oh my Allah,' you say 'Oh my God.'" And then he goes, "Well." And he goes, "Well, it would be very bad if there was a loud bang, and then someone said Allah Akbar, like started screaming."
Very true.
You get tackled.
Very true.
So,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You got to be careful about certain things.
But it's true though. Like the "Oh my God" thing. Like I asked, like, when I was a Christian, I wondered why people were so offended when someone said Jesus Christ or "Oh my God," because it's like, at least they're saying, like, imagine if they were cursing Buddha or saying, at least God's in their forefront is how I used to always picture it.
Especially in like places that have, especially countries that have more of a connection to like the UK historically, will have a similar kind of attitude, because you can actually see that similar uncomfortable feeling in some Southern American communities that are Christian, as well as various African or like Southeast Asian, because of the Christian missionaries that went over at various times in history. And there was a period of time where pretty much all of the denominations were kind of telling people that it's not super cool to just say the name of Yahweh, like, at all. Like the commandment being, "Don't take my name in vain," was actually in practice in a lot of places. Don't say my name fucking at all, bro. Like, don't say it. And so people saying Jesus, in, for instance, a moment of fear, and like sincerely calling out to him, just like, "Jesus, protect me." Even that was still like, "Hey man, you shouldn't be doing that." And then it just got shortened into just the word for God.
Interesting.
Because it was just easier. It just made more sense, right? And the same thing is with like "God bless you" in like various countries too. In the United States, most people now just say "bless you," but the original was, of course, "God bless you," and it was specifically about really trying to do something with, like, curing somebody, right, with a magic spell. But now most people just take it as "bless you." In 200 years from now, it could be spelled completely different. It could just be a single word, it could be something entirely different, just based on the change. But yeah, when it comes to like that expression, especially in a lot of the Western countries, it does come from the practice of like really not saying Yahweh's name. Are you familiar with oh gosh, it's Life of Brian. In Life of Brian, like right near the beginning, there's a guy that's getting stoned, and he's getting stoned by all these women in the city that have these fake beards, because women weren't allowed to stone the men. Of course, this is all a joke. If you don't know Life of Brian, Monty Python show. But anyway, so he's getting stoned, and the Pharisee is like reading out his charges, and the charges is of blasphemy. And the guy says, like, "Oh, I didn't say anything blasphemous. All I said was that this meat wasn't fit for Jehovah." And then everybody goes, and then he goes, "Well, it wasn't fit for Jehovah." Because again, like that was the kind of, feeling and stuff. So yeah, we changed it, and we say our own things now, and we have other better cuss words too, but there is something about calling out to a deity like that, I think, because for so many people, especially people that are away from that belief system now, it was so taboo for so long that there is kind of something about, poking the bear in that sense, because we no longer, it's like me every so often, like I every so often joke about getting struck by lightning, Like, if God be willing, strike me down with lightning right now. All right. Well, so far, so good. But I don't think that's going to happen. It's funny because for a period of time in my life, like I did, and I was around people who did. And if there are people I know right now that if I said something like that, David, they would leave.
Yeah,
they would just leave.
100%.
So
I say this. I say Jesus in text with the G, because it just Jesus. But and also another thing that we do sometimes in the house. If I have a bunch of friends over and stuff, and we're joking, they know I used to be like super religious. So right before like we eat food, if we're like cooked dinner or something, I'll grab their hands and I'll hold it at the table and I'll go, okay, we're all gonna pray. And they go, okay, and I go, dear Neil deGrasse Tyson, thank you for giving us the scientific method.
That's good.
Amen.
That's good.
Because it's like so funny, so wrong on so many different levels. But my favorite, just to kind of put a pin in this, like there's obviously like the problem of evil, which is a big one for that against the argument for God. But I think one of my newest arguments, I don't know if this is an argument for like divine hiddenness, but it's like one of my favorite new like things that I think make religion look like belief in God look really weak is the fact, like apologetics, the fact that there is apologetics, the fact that God needs protecting, to me demolishes the idea of a God. Like, apologetics, especially like the Muslim community, I think is the worst for this. Like, if you draw a photo of their God, that's it, or their prophet, that's it.
Oh yeah,
it's a death sentence.
They even make, just real quick, very devout Muslims will even make kids cartoons where they will blur out the prophet whenever they are telling stories from the Sunnah. It's very funny.
Yeah. It's to me that is bizarre. Like, to me that's like, okay, your God's not, at least this part of is not real, like 100%. What kind of a God is that sensitive? I don't, it's like something that I love to say is like, you're teasing God. I'm telling you, stop teasing God. If there's a creator of the universe, he most likely isn't the genocidal maniac you've made him out to be. He most likely isn't as sensitive or angry or stop teasing God. Like, I'm talking to Christians, Muslims. Stop teasing God. You're making God out to be a bit of a loser. Like, and it's not cool. Stop. Okay. Like, I'm an atheist telling you to stop doing it, because if there is a God, it's not like that.
That type of argument, especially there, is actually something that you could stand very solidly on, for at least all the big Abrahamic faiths, right? Because in lots of Jewish texts, as well as Christian and Muslim texts, there is this concept that runs through about the just outright inability for human beings to truly ascribe attributes to God. Now, of course, they will, right? They will do that. That's why Dr. Stavrakopoulou's new book, right? The God Anatomy, right? That's why she has all these, amazing, ridiculous descriptions that people have come up with. But you can see this concept, throughout for a really long time. And you actually would have, good legs to stand on if you said to a current believing Muslim, Christian, Jew that said to you, like, well, my God, this or that, right? And it's like, well, if you really believe in God's existence to this degree of, again, the concept of God is so broad. It's so all encompassing by definition, on purpose, to give you an answer for all these things. So the fact that you're trying to put yourself on that level of God, for the Muslims specifically, that's actually a particular concept called shirk. That's actually a real problem. Like, that's a big sin, and if you could point that out to them and get them to accept that they are in this moment trying to put themselves on the level of God, they're like, okay, that'd shut it down. But yeah, I mean, again, for me personally, when I was a believing Christian, that was the only answer that was necessary, is the simple fact that you and I have to recognize that God is bigger and better, right? Plain and simple. If you're disagreeing with that, that's fine, but you're not the type of believer that I am. And that's okay. You can be a different believer, but what I'm saying is my God is bigger and better than all the problems you ever want to present. And so if you're sitting here trying to ascribe certain attributes with saying that you have a complete understanding of this, all I'm going to say is, well, then you're not the type of believer that I am. You don't have the faith that I do. And I would argue that my type of faith is the best type of faith. It's the purest type of faith. I just leave it all up to God. You know, Jesus, take the wheel. Why do you have to? Okay, have you ever heard the joke? It's three preachers standing around playing golf, okay? And the first one gets up and he says, "Hey, I got a good idea. Let's raise some money for the church. We're going to take all the money in our pockets. We're going to throw it up around the hole. Whatever lands outside of the hole, we give to charity." The second one goes, "Nah, I got a better idea. We take all the money in our pockets, we throw it up in the air. Whatever lands inside the hole, we give it all to charity." Third preacher says, "I got a great idea. We take all the money in our pockets, we throw it up as high as we can. Whenever God wants, he just keeps. We keep the rest." See? You leave it all up to God. That's what you're supposed to do. That's the true faith. You know, these other two are wanting justification. But why?
Yeah.
You already have it, God. You know, what else do you need?
There's this joke. Now this has just become like us telling jokes, but this is another joke I heard the other day.
That's okay. We're in the final wrap up. We can do whatever the fuck we want at this point.
But I think it's so funny. It's so brilliant. It's so layered. It's actually amazing. So, and I heard this on Ricky Gervais said it on that show with Seinfeld. I forgot what it's called. Comedians in cars getting coffee. It's like, so a Holocaust survivor, you know, went to Auschwitz, survived Auschwitz, lived to 100 and died of old age. He gets to heaven and he goes up to God and he's like, hey God, what's going on? And he tells him this joke, a Holocaust joke, and God doesn't laugh. And then he says, "Oh, guess you had to be there." And it's like it's only funny if you were there. Like, it's like, man, it's so layered because it's like, if you believe God parted the Red Sea to save his people, but then he kept the gates of Auschwitz locked.
Right.
You know, like, right. It's like, damn, dude, I don't know.
It really is. It is the best joke in the world.
Yeah.
It's the best joke in the world, honestly, because it follows exactly the whole point of a joke. You know, in general, the understanding for a long time with comedy is that it's a juxtaposition, right? Mm-hmm. You're presented with two things that, you know, really don't actually go together, but you're showing how there is something that connects them. And then seeing that together makes people kind of go, "Oh, yeah, I never thought of it like that before. That's a good point. That word does sound like that other word." And so, yeah, when you put those two instances right back to back, it follows that structure. It's like the setup is, hey, you know, so God has a chosen people that he protected like 4,000 years ago that nobody has any evidence of. And it's like, all right, what's the end point? And then it's like, apparently he stopped caring, you know, like apparently he just doesn't do that anymore because look at this horrible thing, you know?
So you're a big atheist activist, right? So you promote human rights, LGBT rights. You're an ally. We're very much similar in the same, like we're very similar in that regard. One thing that I wanted to quickly discuss is a tweet by Cameron Bertuzzi of Capturing Christianity.
I saw this.
Yeah. So he said, by the way, he loves saying "by the way." He really likes to do that.
By the way, his ministry needs your support, folks. He can't keep going because he recently had a very wealthy benefactor that passed, and yeah, I mean that was months ago that he said that. But it's
really?
Oh yeah, you haven't heard this?
No.
Oh, I'll see if I can find it after the stream. Like it caused some controversy, and he ended up like having to apologize and stuff. And I will say, I don't think he meant it in a truly malicious way, but I think ultimately the way that it played out did really make it seem like the problem with that person dying was that he lost money. So
yeah, it was weird. So I've reached out to Cameron multiple times to have him on Deep Drinks. I've made videos about it. He's seen the tweets. He's seen, like, I've tagged Michael Jones. Michael Jones responded. He's responded to this tweet. He knows I've invited him on numerous times.
Right.
He doesn't want to come on. And I've noticed this trend where he doesn't seem to. He's starting to come across to me as a bad faith actor because he doesn't seem to platform. He doesn't want to have the conversation. It seems, at least publicly. He wants to just promote the message of Christianity, rather than have an honest conversation and investigate that with people who can push back on his wildly ridiculous claims. So until he comes on, which I don't think he will anymore because of I've insulted him way too many times on stage after he wouldn't come on a bunch of times. But probably, I don't know. He's still welcome. But he tweeted out, by the way, Christians and Muslims should work together to combat atheism, as if atheism is what like a terrorist organization. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then what do you meme? Who's another slavery apologist? He's a slavery apologist. Tweeted and said something, and then he said, "Atheism isn't much a global threat statistically, but it's nevertheless a serious intellectual threat. Talking here of academic atheism, not online atheism. Just because atheism isn't a big global threat doesn't mean it's not worth engaging and responding to." So my first question is, what the fuck is he talking about? But I don't even know what. Like, you're an atheist activist. I'm an atheist. I would say I'm maybe an atheist activist. I don't even know. But like, atheist is like a position, like abstinence is a sex position. It's like he's saying people need to be having sex, and we need to combat abstinence because people need to be having sex. I don't understand what the fuck he's even talking about here. Can you please help me to understand and give us your thoughts on this as we wrap up?
I'll try my best for sure. I think in part he's using a concept of atheism there, at least in that initial tweet, I think, in a super ambiguous way. And in part, the reason for that is that's how words work. I don't know if you've ever heard the word polysemous before. It almost sounds like semen, but it's not. It just means words have multiple meanings. And like, yeah, guys, like that's how stuff works, you know? And I think it's worth taking a few seconds. Again, if you're really trying to understand the other person and where they're coming from, take a few seconds to either explain certain words that we know have different meanings in different contexts, or ask, right? So I think when he's talking, because in that reply to what do you mean, he says something where he does a little bit better of differentiating, which I like. But in that first one, I think what he's talking about is he's thinking of atheism in this very, very straw man way, where what he is taking is that standard sitting in the front row of the church. The atheists have an agenda and they do the this and they're gonna make the whatevers and they're trying to blah, blah. But in reality, there really isn't anything. Like it's really just like a single bullet point on any of these other definitions that I'm about to talk about. But like there's really nothing else to it, you know? Like you can be an atheist and be everything else really at the end of the day, kind of, except for the things that are obvious logical, inconsistencies. But like, again, that's what cognitive dissonance is, where people hold two beliefs that are logically inconsistent. So like, I guess you could still do that even. But the point is, like, in that first tweet, he's using that very, very broad straw man-y point on purpose, because he knows that's what most people are going to see and nobody else is going to see anything further. And so if he clarifies in the comments, that saves him later on when people accuse him of not being genuine and blurring the lines of what he means by that definition. But he also knows that by explaining in the comments instead of the original tweet, that most of the people who already believe that and follow him are just going to see the original tweet. So in the response to what do you mean, who said something like nobody even cares about atheism or something, which you didn't ask me to, but I'll just real quick just to say that like just most of the polls over the last like 50 years seem to show a pretty obvious trend. Now you could argue that polling in general is just fucked up, but hey, that's your stance, not mine. So you may not think it's growing or whatever, but it's just literal numbers. We just count people. It's just like 1, 2 today, and then there's 3 tomorrow. That's more. So, but when he goes into that explanation of online atheism versus academic atheism, what he's actually trying to make the distinction of is something that is definitely a conversation in a lot of atheist circles and communities and stuff, where individuals will say, hey, in the philosophical literature, the usage of the term atheism is almost exclusively, if not definitely exclusively, used to mean definitely do not believe in God's existence, right? Not simply, I lack a belief. Not simply, I do not have a belief. In the academic philosophic literature, that is correct. just plain and simple. And I don't really think there's a problem with that any way around it. We can argue about the semantics and whether or not that is a proper usage or whatnot. But in part, I kind of feel like that's silly because I'm not a mechanic. And so if my mechanic tells me that this is the fucking belt or filter that I need for my car and all the other mechanics do this, it's weird for me to be like, yeah, but I use a different filter. So if we're talking in that sense, that seems to be what it means. And that's okay. But a lot of people that take that label, especially in one that's more maybe, I mean, you are an academic, Dr. Kill. That is actually true. So, I mean, I know that's at least true. And I think you are an atheist. I don't know if that technically means you're an academic. Well, it's like, like math, right? This plus this equals.
Kip,
yeah, I think.
Kip recently told his story on Myth Vision, like a pre-recorded video, and I'll help Derek out with the editing. So I did the editing for it. Man. Just wait till that thing drops. Awesome. That is such a good interview. It's like 40 minutes, but it's just Kip's story is just wild and honest.
The first time I ever saw Dr. Kip on a channel, you know, because like I subscribe to like fucking everything, right? It's very rare that there's a cool like atheist academic, like, you know, this type of space channel that I don't know about. And the first time I saw him on something, I was like, damn, this dude is good. Like, is he gonna be on more shit? And then it was like a week later, and I saw him on like 7 other different shows and stuff. And yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, amazing. This is a good comment. My mom likes him, so like my mom watches this show sometimes, and she's like, I like Kip. So she, you know, there's few that she tells me that she likes. One of them is Kip. Everyone loves Kip. Yeah. Well, not everyone.
Well, there's probably somebody. Yeah.
The sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It will blow your mind. No, I said not everyone, but Kip knows who I'm talking about. We've had some private conversations. So it's funny.
Yeah.
So and of course, go subscribe to Kip Davis's channel as well. Kip's coming on again in like another month, and it's going to be a wild episode. I haven't promoted it yet, but just you guys wait. So yeah, back to Cameron's. We got like another few minutes. Yeah. Just to wrap up on that, it's like I don't know why it's this. They clearly see it as like some sort of like a threat or something. Which is weird to me. It's very weird to me.
I know.
It's like he showed his power level. You know, it's like that's what it was.
It's a core tenet in the 2 particular ideologies that he's discussing. In Islam exclusively, right? The idea of the end of the world is a really big deal. The idea of like Allah coming back and stuff is so important that even rocks will start snitching on nearby Jews hiding behind them. That's how important it is to make sure that you're a Muslim at the end of days. Christianity is very similar. Christ comes back with a fucking sword and an army, and he will absolutely walk up to his ankles in the blood of the wicked. So that's why they see it as a fight, is because it's actually an inherent part of their ideology. It truly is. And so, yeah, like that's why when I take the stance on stuff like, you know, oh my gosh, like, yeah, these as just by themselves, the more people out there that accept an ideology that at its core says something like that if you disagree with me, the way the whole story plays out is genocide for you and your other peeps. Like, that's a destructive, toxic ideology. If you believe that and don't act on that in such a way that it is not causing obvious, tangible harm to other people, you're doing better than the people who believe that and are causing harm, and you're doing better than the people who don't believe that but are still causing harm. But still, at the end of the day, the best thing would be to not believe that and not cause harm, because even just believing that is something that opens you up to accepting other justification for dehumanization of people, and then therefore more harm. Like it's just inherent in that belief is my view on it. Not everybody takes that view, and that's fine. But also I would say, hey, Cameron, just in case you're not sure about this, please take a look at the most popular Dawa individuals in the Muslim community online right now. Take a look at people like Daniel Hakikaju, or Ali Dawa, or Muhammad Hijab, Sajid Lipam. Take a look at these people.
That's who he wants to side with. He wants to side with
They
the
don't want
person
to
who said-
side with you. They
Yeah,
want to kill you. They have
but
literally said those words. They have said explicitly, this is not me exaggerating. Ali Dawa has specifically stated that if you are a non-believing Muslim, you are somebody that deserves death under Islamic law. He has said that. You can argue whether that's true. That's his belief. So
Yeah, but
Cameron, they will not side with you.
But isn't that crazy that he wants to
Yes.
sign with them, and he wants to sign with Daniel, who recently just said marrying off an 11-month-old.
I gotta
is
say,
okay.
one of the greatest debates I saw inspiring
Michael
philosophy,
Jones
in my opinion.
is just like
one of the
huge
most.
claps, Michael Jones.
I was impressed. I don't know how, I couldn't have done that. I really don't think that I could have. Yeah, I was impressed by that performance by him, that he kept.
It was so funny because Michael and I were chatting beforehand, and he's like, dude, he's like, this is one study that he keeps quoting over and over and over again.
Oh,
and he's like, it's like his one study. He's like, but he doesn't tell you that like parts of it are talking about like Muslims loving to be with like, don't take away a Muslim's wife, but don't take away their boy lover child. Like, it's like, it's wild. Like,
it really is.
Man. So just as we wrap up, I want to wrap up with one last question. But if anyone wants to be filled in with a Cameron Bertuzzi drama with myself, here's a little video I put together called "Is God All Powerful?" and it's a video responding to Cameron's tweet. I did the same thing as him. I said, by the way, an all-powerful God shouldn't need to rest on the seventh day. He got angry and retweeted it and said, by the way, it never says that God didn't rest on the seventh day. Like, he's just very panicked.
So he didn't need to, but he chose to? That sounds stupid. That doesn't seem to make sense.
No, but it's wild. I go right into it and I go into the scriptures and I go like, wait a second, like, like just watch it. I think it's a great video and it's only got like 600 views, but like check it out. I use Oblivion music, but watch this after this. It's a fantastic little 10-minute video. But we got one super chat. I just want to read out. Dance, discovering ancient history with Pat Lowinger. Dance, that's why we're here. Oh yeah.
That's right, folks. Dancer for money over here. That's right.
Thank you so much for the super chat, Sydney Davis Jr., who you introduced me to. We've become friends. She's coming on soon. It's gonna be awesome.
She's awesome. She's great.
She's great. We had a great chat yesterday. So
yeah, y'all chatted just yesterday.
Yeah. It was good. It was really good. I wanted to ask you. I'll ask you one question so we can wrap up on time. What, if anything, would change your mind?
That's a really good question. And the answer is, unfortunately, something that probably is unsatisfying for the vast majority of believers out there, because it's a broad answer. Because what I say at the end of the day is the same thing that I would need to accept any other claim. My goal is to try to be as consistent as possible when it comes to this type of stuff, right? So if somebody comes to me and says, I bought a car yesterday, the same thing that I would need to justify the belief in that would be the same thing, which is, at the end of the day, basically this cute little phrase that's been going around now in a lot of different communities of like a novel, testable, repeatable prediction of some kind, right? So something that is obviously only going to be answered by a handful of different criteria, right? We lay that out beforehand. We go take a look. It turns out to be the case. We go up to other people that have never done it before. We go, hey, here's our thing. And they're like, oh, okay, that seems like an interesting hypothesis. How would we test? And then you go, here's how you test it. Then they try it too. And I just don't go through that level of effort again for every little thing, just like I don't go through the full justification for why I pick this bar over that bar. When it comes to my friend buying a new fucking Honda, it doesn't matter that much at the end of the day. Like, it just isn't that important. And accepting that claim doesn't end up giving me all these other burdens later on. But accepting the claim that Bigfoot exists, or accepting the claim that fairies exist, or magic, or God, or hell, that ends up providing all these other problems later on. And so really, at the end of the day, it is the exact same criteria. It's just in a very specified argument. And that's why it takes a lot to meet that burden of proof. That's the whole
Mhm.
point of Sagan's thought experiment about the dragon in the garage, is it starts to become more and more ridiculous as you get on. And by the time you get to that last thing, it's like, okay, if somebody came up to you and started with just that, the level of evidence that you would fucking need is so high that it is basically just acceptable to say that doesn't exist, right?
Or it's absolutely indistinguishable from a universe where it doesn't exist.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Elliot, Secular Rarity, for coming on. This has been a very enjoyable interview.
Thanks,
We could do this again anytime you want.
Yeah, hit me up.
Super lovely to talk to you. Thanks for coming out, guys, and I'll see everyone later tomorrow with the Sexy Education panel.
You're gonna want to see
we're
that.
We're gonna head off now, and you can check out Secular Rarity. His links are in pinned, and also you'll see him on Ben's show in a couple of minutes. So see all you guys then. Bye.